The 2022 World Series is set. We give our thoughts not only on that, but also reflect on some of our breakout candidates that we mentioned at the start of the season and give our thoughts on it.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to welcome you back into Locked On Red Sox podcast, and thank you so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. I'm your host, Massachusetts Pirates team insider, Jake Ignazsewski, and here, as always, with my co-host, NESN's Lauren Willand. So, Lauren, did you expect the World Series of 2022 to be Astros and Phillies?
No, not at all. I cannot remember who I have. I think I had my NESN prediction was Dodgers Astros. I was pretty sure, but I'm not very good at predictions. I said that in Monday's episode. Not very good at predictions, as we will get into later. But no, but good for the Phillies. I mean, they're fun. They're having a good time over there, and I mean the Astros. There's nothing to say about them. That's a good, strong, stacked, complete team. And I'm happy for Christian Vasquez. How can you not be?
And, what a story for the Phillies. That's one thing that MLB Network did a great job of compiling, everything that happened throughout Philadelphia's season and, the firing of Girardi, the big losing streak, and really the whole resurgence of the organization, especially going into the second half and ultimately into the playoffs. But it really is incredible how much competition there is in the major leagues right now. And, you can look at the rebuilding franchises that aren't spending money, but it's really incredible. I don't think you see this in a lot of leagues really at all. The different, not only World Series winners every single year, but also the differentiality of, the teams that are competing for the World Series. And especially this season, that was very eminent.
Yeah, it certainly was. And it's definitely going to be a really fun World Series. I think that you have two very motivated, very hungry teams, two very different teams in a sense. You look at how many wins the Phillies have compared to the Astros. And yes, regular season stats don't matter, but it's just something kind of fun to compare going into the World Series. I mean, you play 162 games to get to this point, and it comes down to just winning 4 or more. So to see the differences, the similarities between them, it makes for a very fun and unpredictable World Series. Anything can happen in the postseason, especially when it comes to the World Series.
Exactly. And you brought up the records, and I find it so fascinating because it's a 19 win difference. That's the second largest between World Series opponents in MLB history. As you mentioned, Astros had 106, Phillies had 87. And that's the big thing that I think really rings true. And, obviously a lot of baseball fans understand this, that really all just depends on what you do in October. And especially with how hot the Phillies got, offensively and defensively and pitching wise, it really showed how they were able to overcome teams like the Padres, overcome these different teams through their path. And you even saw it with the Yankees too. They were one of the hottest teams going into the playoffs, and then their offense just fell flat.
It's crazy, and especially like Aaron Judge, because he was the offense for the Yankees. He was the topic all season. His home runs, his ability to just hit, and he could not do it in the postseason. And that's when you need to do it. That's when, you need to help your team. And we saw it happen with the Red Sox last year. We saw the offense fall flat, unfortunately. So we Red Sox fans understand, but it is just bonkers to me that the Yankees have the talent that they do, the payroll obviously that they do, and they just fall flat in the postseason time and time again. It's been 13 years since they've made it to the World Series. That is a long time for the Yankees. I know that there's teams in not just in MLB, but in NHL franchises as well that have waited a lot longer than 13 years for their team to get to their respective finals. But when I'd love to know how Yankees fans are feeling about the state of this team when it comes to, I mean, obviously Aaron Judge, is he going to come back? Aaron Boone, Brian Cashman, what is the vibe? Because I'm sensing it's probably not the best, especially with the talent this team has had over the years. There's no reason they shouldn't have won a World Series at least once in the last 13 years.
There's definitely a lot of frustration, and especially finishing it. As you mentioned, it's been that long, and I actually didn't realize this. I figured this out a few days ago. There's actually an account that tracks the days since the last Yankees World
Oh, that's
Series,
awesome. They have one of those for an
and
NHL team too.
and if you're a Red Sox fan, you're ever having a bad day or getting frustrated about the team, just look at that, and it'll just put a big smile on your face. But you rung it true with the Judge comment. I think I found it very interesting. I can't remember what commentator it was during the playoffs, but one of them mentioned they believed it was the chase that really mentally drained him, and especially with him having to guess on every single at bat to just get the right swing, and
Yep.
especially with him getting walked as many times as he did, all the pressure around him, especially with so many fans coming just to see that one singular home run, and it can mentally drain somebody, and I can definitely see that how that can happen for Aaron Judge. But at the end of the day, just the rest of the team just really needed to step up as a whole.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point that, maybe it was a mental thing. This game is just as important mentally as it is physically. And if your head's not in it, if it's elsewhere, if you're too focused on something, and then you have the fans booing him as well, it's a lot. And yes, you shouldn't. I mean, it's easier said than done to say, oh, you shouldn't just let that outside noise get to you. But you're on the biggest stage right now. There's a ton of pressure on you. You just broke the AL home run record. Again, yeah, the chase. I mean, that was on him all season, especially toward the end when he just could not get 61 in 62 at that time. Felt like it took forever. And I wasn't even watching Yankees games. I just felt like every time there was a tune in, like, oh, is it this time? Is it this time? Like, how many times is it going to take for him? And of course, it's a 162 game season. It's grueling to begin with. So everyone now at this point is running on fumes. But at the end of the day, it's not just Aaron Judge's fault. It's the Yankees as a whole. You win as a team, you lose as a team, and they just couldn't once again get it done.
And there's so many question marks surrounding New York going into the offseason. But the one thing that I will say, there's a position, and we brought this up in the crossover at the beginning of the season, is starting pitching. It always seems like starting pitching for the Red Sox and Yankees are such a struggle. And the one thing that I will say is I feel like they've figured it out in a sense. Obviously we saw Frankie Montas not be as good as expected. Jordan Montgomery obviously went to the Cardinals and wasn't or really surged with the Cardinals, and a lot of people looked at that trade as a massive mistake. But I feel like the one thing that Red Sox and Yankees fans can really agree upon from this season is that the contracts for Aaron Judge and Xander Bogaerts were way too much of a talking point, and both fan bases just can't wait for it to go to rest.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure that, Yankees fans are just anxious to see what happens with Judge. Obviously, Red Sox fans, I talked about this on Monday's episode, just about Xander Bogaerts and his decision. Like it's been a storyline since Aaron Judge turned down that extension. It's been a storyline since Bogaerts has said that he doesn't want to talk in the season, or he'd be willing to, but his agent doesn't want to. And it's going to be a storyline until both of those contracts are done. And I'll be excited when it happens, because we talk about it all the time. What else more can we say? And I'm sure Yankees fans feel the same way, where it's like, what more can they say? They obviously, I'm assuming, want to keep Aaron Judge in pinstripes, and we also want to keep Xander Bogaerts in a Red Sox uniform. But there's not going to be any real updates until after the World Series, and then it's just going to come full force. And then it's probably going to go real dead for a while. Then you'll have winter meetings, the GM meetings, all that good stuff. And then it'll probably pick back up again. But at least that we know that there will not be a lockout this year,
Right.
that we have to deal with. No
Thank
lockout this year. We got a few years of peace.
Thank God. The one other takeaway that I really had from these playoffs as a whole so far is Chaim Bloom needs to take notes. You got to take
yeah.
notes at the pitching staffs of both the Cleveland Guardians and the Houston Astros, just filled with so much depth. And that word is something that he spoke about all throughout this year, but at the same time, being able to have that eye for talent. You see
Right.
Framber Valdez, Luis Garcia, Yaquibi, said it right that time. But those different pitchers for Houston specifically, and then when you also look at the Guardians side, they just continue to churn out so much efficient young pitching. And that's just something that the Red Sox have lacked for years to come, or for years in the past, and have hoped that Chaim Bloom was going to be a guy who took what the Rays did in their success book and implemented to the Red Sox farm system. Now we've yet to fully be able to see that. Brian Bayo, you could say he's an example, but he wasn't from Chaim Bloom, and that's just one thing that needs to be a massive priority: is efficient young depth in the minors.
Yeah, and we're not dumb enough to think that there's another Justin Verlander out there. No one is going to be Justin Verlander again. What he's doing now is just absolutely insane. He's just getting better and better with age. He's so efficient, but it's the guys behind him in that rotation that help make it so dominant. And you have a threatening rotation. That's what I wanted to say. And the Red Sox never really had that. They could have, but with injuries and everything, it just did not work out. And they just didn't have, like you said, the depth to fill in. Do they're planning to have the depth. Yes, we have Brian Bayo, but he wasn't ready when he came up, but he started to figure it out toward the end. He's going to be incredibly efficient. But who else is there behind him? Who else do we have? And I know that, yes, it takes time to develop players and this and that, but I don't know how much patience Red Sox fans are going to have when they're watching teams like the Guardians, like the Astros, and just have this pitching depth, and they're just sitting back and being like, what's it like? What's it like
Right.
to have competent pitchers, to have reliable pitchers, and to have pitchers where you're just sitting there and being like, oh, is this guy going to blow it? Like, it's probably a good feeling. We wouldn't know.
And Sox fans have that optimism for guys like Hunter Seabold, Josh Winkowski, and they didn't really show the results that most fans anticipated. But the other aspect of it too, that I feel like the Astros have been so good with, and obviously it helps with their massive rebuild that they had, led by Jeff Lunau. But being able to just have the next man up, you see with the Patriots, it's just do your job, and they always have the next man up. But it seems like it doesn't matter if Carlos Correa walks away; they got Jeremy Pena to fill in. Doesn't matter if George Springer leaves; they got Chas McCormick, who ended up helping them ultimately win last night's game. But they just need to figure out a way to have that next man up sort of depth in that farm system already ready, and that's something that Chaim Bloom has spoke about that he wants to have, sort of like the Dodgers, but being able to have that finishing cast, unlike the Dodgers, who seem to always, doesn't matter who they have in their lineup or their pitching staff. Granted, they always deal with injuries. They either lose in the NLDS or the NLCS. Being able to have that finishing sort of depth in players and group to be able to get to where the Astros are, to ultimately have a dynasty, which we've seen them have even past the whole cheating scandal.
Yeah, and you said it when you have they lose Carlos Correa, and you're thinking like, whoa, like that's obviously a huge loss. But they had somebody ready right away. If the Red Sox lose Bogarts, you're probably going to move Story to short. That would be my guess. So there is kind of a backup there. But then you're filling in other pieces around the diamond there. You have Kike at second, okay, but then your outfield, like you're making sacrifices. You're making sacrifices in different parts because you don't have the proper depth. And it's just something that Chaim Bloom has said the right things. He has said all the right things, and he makes you want to believe him. But I understand why Red Sox fans are tread with caution and maybe a little pessimistic, because there hasn't been anything massive for them to be like, okay, we definitely have a lot of faith in this depth, and we have a lot of faith in this team, in the development, because we just haven't seen too much of it in a way that will make fans confident. We've seen good stuff. We know it can be there, but they just haven't developed properly at this time. So yes, Chaim Bloom's saying all the right things, but now it's time for him to do all the right things, because we've mentioned this before that he's probably, if he's not already, on thin ice with this fan base.
And I think the big test is once those guys who are his guys fully show if they are what they were expected. Now we see Tristan Cassis, we see Brian Bayo, we see Jaron Duran. None of those are Chaim Bloom's guys. Chaim Bloom's guys are Nick York, Marcelo Meyer, a majority of the guys that he just drafted. And so that's going to be the big teller, is if those young guys, if they ultimately become who they're are expected to become. Obviously, that's not always the case, but seems like the Guardians, the Rays, and what's the other one that I said? The Astros seem to really have that formula. But, we're going to start to really reflect on some of, those predictions that we made at the start of the season. And boy, were we oblivious. But we're going to speak more about that in our second segment. But before we do that, I just want to take a second to talk to you about BetOnline.net, which is your number one source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season. You can find all the latest sports developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. So head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. So now starting to really reflect on these breakout candidates that we had, and it's really tough to keep a straight face looking at this list. And it was tough too to listen to back on the episode of when we spoke about these, and the optimism that we had for the season. And all I thought was, boy, we had no clue what we were getting ready for, and sort of the roller coaster season that had become. But I want to start off with my breakout candidate. I said it was going to be Tanner Houck, and it was funny because right after I said that, I was like, he was just announced to be in the Red Sox rotation. And I thought in my head, well, that took maybe 2 seconds to where he was actually in the rotation. But, we really saw, I believe, Tanner Houck sort of break out. I mean, when he was in the closer position for the Red Sox, it seemed like they had fixed the closer issue. Now he had some issues with his back, which ultimately ended up forcing him to have surgery at the end of the season. And, when he was in that starting role, it was pretty much what I identical said preseason, which was, he just couldn't go the 3 innings. And so that's why they put him in the bullpen. But now I feel like his defined role. Now, he wasn't the breakout candidate that anybody really expected or, anticipated him to perform up to the level. But I still think he sort of got to where I thought he was going to be. And then yours,
yeah, you did better than me. You did much better than me. I liked that Tanner Houck kind of showed what he can bring if he's in a defined role. So I think that we saw enough to be confident in him next year, and a fully healthy Tanner Houck will be good for this Red Sox team. Hopefully a fully healthy Chris Sale will also be good for this team, because he was my breakout candidate. And listen, the rib, it's a freak thing. His wrist is a freak thing. Obviously the pinky getting blown off into oblivion, freak thing. So
that was just going over and over in my head when I was listening.
Oh, it was just
I was like, we have no clue what's the massacre that's going to happen.
Nothing. We like you said, we were so hopeful, and I thought it was going to be almost a safe bet to pick Chris Sale as the breakout candidate, because we know how he prepares for the season. We know how hungry he is to have a fully healthy season with this Red Sox team. He knows he hasn't lived up to his contract. He knows he hasn't given 100%, 110% what he wants to this team. So I was like, this is the perfect time. He's going to come in angry, hungry, ready to go. And he unfortunately just couldn't stay healthy. And hopefully next season he can, because it's just been so tough to watch what he hasn't done for this team. Yes, he's been great when he's been great, but it's been so few and far between with his good starts compared to him being on the pitching mound and not being on the pitching mound. He's been away from the team more than he's been with the team. And that's just, it sucks. And there's nothing, we knew Tommy John was going to come eventually. There's nothing he can do. That's a long, long recovery. There's nothing you can do there. A stress fracture in the rib, you just got to rest. You got to let that thing heal before it turns worse. I don't know how his whole hand didn't break when he got hit with the line drive at Yankee Stadium. No idea. And then just, falling off his bike. I'm not very good at riding a bike. I can, but I understand. I'm surprised I haven't broken my wrist riding a bike. But I'm disappointed. It obviously didn't go the way I was hoping. Obviously, he was hoping. And maybe when we're doing season predictions of 2023, maybe I'll pick him again. Maybe I'll go a different route. But maybe it's me. Maybe I'm cursing these players. Maybe I just shouldn't make predictions anymore.
So the one thing when you brought up just what we've seen from Chris Sale, since the injuries started really rippling, is I just think of that strikeout in 2018, and just thinking back to that flash forwarding 4 years into the future, and what I believe, like what has happened. I would think that it was honestly like a cruel horror movie That's what I would think. And
Yeah.
somebody definitely just wrote up the script and was like, let me just make the things that won't even seem believable happen. And that's just what's so unfortunate. I always just think back to our crossover with Locked On Reds when I said that the number one thing that really rides on this Red Sox season is how Chris Sale comes back. And it's just so gut wrenching because after that happened, all Red Sox fans know it. That's sort of when the season ended. And it's just so crazy to think that one slight little thing just ended it is so crazy.
It is. Yeah, it is. Like the second, I remember very vividly, it was a Sunday and Derek and I were really excited to watch the game. It was the first game we'd been able to actually sit down and watch together in a long time. And as soon as that happened, he broke his pinky, we just kind of got up and we started going on with our day. We're like, I think that's it. I think that's it. Not just for Chris Sale, but for the Red Sox, because there's always that one moment in every season where you're like, that was the turning point, whether it's good or bad. And I truly feel when Chris Sale got his pinky blown off, I was
I'm
like,
getting chills right now.
I was like, that's not good.
Because I hate it because after that, then there was the 28-5, and then the Red Sox allowed like 14 runs at Yankee Stadium after he got out. I hate thinking about it. So let's talk about some positive things. Matt Barnes. We talked about him in our last sort of reflection episode. Pretty incredible to see the resurgence of him. Very curious though. I mean, this is something that has been a reoccurring question. Who's the team's closer? And so how are the Sox going to really use him? We did see him be used sometimes in the closer position, sometime in the setup role. I'd be comfortable at 7th or 8th. Don't pin him down in a specific spot where you're putting pressure on him, but hover him around 7th or 8th and, do him or John Schreiber, whoever they pick up in free agency or trade for.
Yeah, I think it was great to see him come back after he had the stint on the IL and really close out the season strong. There wasn't a whole lot of positives to end this season, but Matt Barnes was certainly a bright spot on this team. And I am all for putting him in the closer role if he can prove that he can sustain what he did last year. That's obviously a big ask, and it's a lot of trust to put into him after showing a smaller sample size, but a consistent sample size of being good. He's got to have a strong offseason, a healthy offseason, and a really good training camp, spring training, and just be ready to go. But I'm all for putting him back in the closer role if he does what he did in the last 23 games that he had. It was 2021 first half, 2021 Matt Barnes, and it was really good to see because he earned he earned a spot on this team as the closer. He was so dominant, and then it just fell apart. So to see him just bounce back took a long time, took a lot longer than I would have liked, but preaching patience, something I do not have, and it worked out. So I hope it's the same thing next year with him, that it's the same consistency. The Red Sox desperately need a closer, really, really bad.
And yeah, they really do. I maybe have like 3 or 4 like little meltdown rants on here, and it was really funny like looking back at like how frustrated I was because I wanted to believe in this team so bad, and they really just got to figure it out. But it was really staggering to really look at the numbers. The last time we spoke about him, I believe it was like 3 episodes ago before we had TQ and also Joey on, but really seeing, in the first half, he had like a 7.20 ERA, and then in the second half, it was like 1.50 or something like that. I really did not think it was that obvious, how much of a difference it was. I noticed it a little bit, but I didn't think it was that much of a differential. And one thing that wasn't a differential whatsoever was what people expected of Jackie Bradley Jr. after the Red Sox traded for him from the Brewers and what actually happened during 2022.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of eyes on Jackie Bradley when he got here, when he was traded back to the Red Sox. And I think we knew, if we didn't know, then I can't save you, but we knew that his offense was not why he was brought back. And he didn't really seem to just find that groove. And he looked uncomfortable a lot of the time. And maybe it was just the inevitable. He knew that he wasn't going to be on this team the entire season. I don't know. But I'm glad that he had success with the Blue Jays and that he was able to go to the postseason in some capacity. But it was of course, I never root for anyone's demise, but I was really hoping that he would be almost like an X factor to this team, only because, you trade Hunter Renfroe away to get Jackie Bradley Jr. You confused a lot of fans. You angered a lot of fans with that trade, Chaim Bloom, and it was not a good way to go into the lockout because we were left with more questions at that point and nobody could talk. As soon as that clock hit midnight, we could not talk. We could not get answers. So it was just a lot of questions, confusion, but I was hopeful he would at least be some sort of X factor. Not necessarily the X factor, but just kind of something to help this team. And he just couldn't. And you look back, the Renfro trade now just looks worse because they ended up trading Jackie Bradley Jr. and he ended DFAing Jackie Bradley Jr. So I don't know. I wanted more from him, but I mean, who didn't? But just another black check on Chaim Bloom's record. X check, whatever.
And we spoke about this when the DFA first happened. This just puts so much more pressure on David Hamilton and Alex Pinellas.
Yeah.
Now Alex Pinellas is somebody that I really want to have on before the offseason ends. I'm really curious to hear his thoughts on that pressure. David Hamilton, we did have on. He mentioned it was sort of a shock for him out of the lockout. And I think the lockout was a major factor for how people really felt about it. Because if it just happened, then another move happened the next day, it wouldn't have been as much of a conversation. But I have a little proposal, and hopefully I know Chaim Bloom and the Red Sox front office listens to this podcast, but if they are able to convince Jackie Bradley to only play home games, I think that he could be a serviceable major league player on this roster. I don't know like what the difference was. I don't know if he wore different underwear. I don't know like if he had different breakfasts like on at home or whatever. But the road and home splits are pretty crazy. I mean home, it's not like, holy crap, this guy's an all-star. He's batting 256 with 3 home runs. But on the road, it's 153 with 1 home run. So, I mean, it's really weird.
And we see this kind of often with different players where they're just comfortable in their home ballpark, wherever that home is. I don't ever want to see Jackie Bradley Jr. back in a Red Sox uniform. That is not a personal shot. I love him. I think he's a wonderful person. He's a beautiful family, a very kind, loving, generous family, and he's a very genuine human being. I don't want him on the Red Sox ever again. I just think that love affair is over, and there's bigger priorities out there than trying to get Jackie Bradley Jr. back on this team. And like I said, love the guy. Absolutely love him. But no more. Don't stop bringing back old players and try to make it work. Do not do it.
Next time he comes back, I want to see him in 2028 when the team is celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the 2018 series. That's when I want to see him next, because that's the next time he'll be in a Red Sox uniform. He'll be able to get his standing ovation, whatever. But I'm very curious to see if he's on a major league roster next year. I really don't think so. And it'll stink because, as you mentioned, great guy, was always such a great teammate. And I would hate to see him be bumped around here and there as like a minor league sort of deal journeyman. I would hate to see him go out like that.
Yeah, I would too. I mean, I hate when these careers kind of go this way because they don't get to really end it on their terms. And I know that his family loves Boston. I know that they really love, raising their kids here, and they just love the city. They do a lot of charity work with this city. I know his wife does a lot of great things too. So, but he's what, 30 years old? He's young. He's not old by any means. So it's like, does he retire or does he be just a guy who's on a team like a Brock Holt, where it just kind of gets passed around to team until finally they're like, we don't want this guy. Unfortunately, great clubhouse guy, great clubhouse presence, really good character, just not a good ball player who's going to make our team better.
Now, if the Red Sox were the A's, and at least this season they weren't really playing for too much. They brought back Brock Holt, Jackie Bradley Jr. The kids, announced his final up at bat. It's a whole good loving moment. That'd be grandy and great for maybe the last game of the season. But I hope we see both of them in 2028 for the 10-year anniversary. But it was very interesting to look back at these breakout predictions. we're gonna continue to bring you content throughout this offseason. Not only continuing to reflect on this season, but starting to prepare for the off season. We really want to start to look forward to 2023, start thinking about guys that the Red Sox might sign, as well as continue to bring on players, different people from the Red Sox organization, reporters, influencers. And if there's anybody that you would like us to talk to or any topics you want us to talk about, let us know on Twitter. It's over at LO_Red Sox. You can go over and follow us there. You can also follow myself. It's at Jake Iggy, and also Lauren. It's la, 3 laws, Lauren with 4 R's. But as always, we greatly appreciate everybody making Locked On Red Sox their first listen of every single day. Make your second listen and check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. But as always, we greatly appreciate everybody tuning in. We hope everybody has a great rest of their day, and we'll end it how we always ended. Let's go Sox. Peace.